Okay, to start the installation, you're going to need several things. You're going to need a 10 and a 12 millimeter socket, 4 and a 5 millimeter Allen wrench, an extension or whatever type of ratchet you have, flathead screwdriver. You're going to need a drill, masking tape. You're going to need your die grinder and some thinner die grinding discs. This die grinder I went and got from Walmart for like 20 bucks, and the discs were like $3. You're gonna need some markers, a Sharpie when you're masking, and you need to mark. You're gonna need a tape measure, some gloves for when you're working with the carbon, and some glasses. And you're probably gonna need a mask because you don't want to be breathing carbon dust. And the drill bits. I'm just using what I have. I have an 1/8 drill bit, and then a 1/4 inch drill bit, and some other ones there just in case. And that's pretty much it. So for the jack process, you're gonna need a jack, and if your car is low like mine, it's gonna be a little bit tricky. I have some stands here and some ramps. My car is super low. You can't even get your fingers between there. So what I was worried about is the jacking point under the car might interfere with the diffusers once you actually mount them. So if you rise the car up and then you put the jack stands on the side and then you put the jacking point back underneath, it might clash with the diffuser you just installed. So what I'm going to do is back up the car onto these ramps, and then once the car is high enough, or once they're on the ramps, then I'm gonna go ahead and use the jack here and jack it up from the jack point, and then rest them down on those stands that you see. You don't have to do this before the diffuser strakes are installed, but when you're dropping the car, again, this is something you need to be very careful with so that you don't destroy the new diffusers you just got. Another optional thing you could do is just get some 2x4s and get your car, I don't know, roughly 4 inches above the ground, and just put it underneath the tires, or yeah, just when you jack the car up, make sure you rest them on those on the tires first. That way you have some clearance when this jack extends, rather than it interfering with these little points here. Then it provides as much clearance as possible between the diffusers and this point here, which is where it will be mounted on that little nipple underneath the diffuser. So of course, the parts that you want to make sure you have that you have all the hardware that you need to install these diffusers, and you want to make sure you have all the right diffusers as well. As far as direction, you're supposed to have 2 pairs and they're mirrored, and those are the things you need before you begin the installation. Otherwise you're gonna have to order night parts from Japan. Haha. So I just jacked the car up. You want to make sure you jack the car up as high as possible, and get it on the stands as quickly as possible. You want to allow as much clearance as possible so that you can work under the car safely, or remove the diffuser as easily as possible. So I just rested the car down onto the stands, and you want to make sure that the stands are exactly flat with the ground. And these are the little mounting points here underneath the car. You want to lower the jack down incrementally and make sure that everything is going down smoothly before you actually allow the full weight to rest on the stands, just so that you don't have any problems or any disasters happen. Disaster! So basically now you need to remove the clips and the 10 millimeter and the 12 millimeter nuts. So the clips here, there are 5, and then on the sides there will be 8 10 millimeters, And then right here, there's going to be 14 12mm sockets. So you're going to go ahead and remove this whole diffuser tray. Another thing you want to pay attention to when you're jacking your car up is it's going to tip forward. And you want to make sure your front lip, or if you have an aftermarket splitter, you want to make sure it doesn't start to tip or crack against the concrete. Luckily, mine's not touching, but this is something you need to note when you're doing it. Alright, so I just went ahead and I removed the diffuser panel. Essentially it slides out. While you're here underneath the car, you might as well go ahead and remove these little panels here that rest on the diffuser. Sorry. So they're just held down by these little clips here around the splash guard. So you can go ahead and remove those because you're going to be modifying them. The next thing you want to do is grab your template that's applied for the diffuser, and you want to locate this edge here. This edge here is supposed to precisely meet with this edge here on the diffuser where the exhaust goes through, and these two circles here are supposed to meet with this edge or depression of where the original 12mm nuts go. So if you properly align this edge with these edges here, or this continuous edge on the diffuser, you should precisely get your template set up so that you can get your right holes mounted. And this step is important because if your diffuser is crooked for whatever reason, you will, I guess, hinder how your car is going to feel. So, I mean, if you can imagine air going underneath your car and it has a leftward force, it's going to start to push the rear of your car in that direction. So you want to take your time with this step and make sure that you do it properly. Another tip is also to go ahead and clean the diffuser of all the dirt and particles underneath. You want to make sure that you have a proper surface so that you can have the template adhere to it better. And that's it. Okay, so I finally installed the template and I came super close to the edge. As close as I could possibly get. The depressions are lined up perfectly and I'm satisfied with it. So I'm going to proceed into drilling these little tiny holes out. So here's the part where you want to grab your drill bits. I'm using a 1/8 drill bit and a 1/4 inch drill bit, and then I have this random one here because it actually has a point. So I'm going to use this one to actually pilot the hole so I can properly center it with the 1/8. Then I'm going to use the 1/8 and drill through the diffuser, and once that hole is started, then I'm going to use a 1/4 inch and finish drilling out the hole. Okay, so I finally finished doing all the drilling and I removed the template, and if you look closely you can see that little tiny fibrous pieces on the diffuser. Those are the pieces of carbon fiber. What you want to do is stop those ends, and you can use a small piece of sandpaper and just go ahead and simply just try and get just those edges and just sand it smooth, just so that you don't create like a starting area where like it'll just strip through the rest of the material. So what you want to do is just kind of round out those edges and just stop that fraying that you see there from continuing, and just smooth that out a little bit. Or if you have a Dremel or a cutoff wheel or something, you can use one of like the little tiny sanding areas and just lightly sand the area. Alright, so I went ahead and removed those burrs or those pieces of carbon that were sticking out. And what this will ultimately do is create a better contact surface between when you bolt the diffuser strakes to the diffuser. You create a proper preload between the bolt and the diffuser strake itself. You're not feeling the force of those little I guess threads or fibers sandwiching between the bolt and the diffusers. So that's ultimately the purpose of it. You don't actually have to if you don't want to, but I'm a little bit meticulous, so that's why I decided to do it. Alright, so now we're moving on to the cutting part. This is where you use your die grinder with one of your thinner cutoff wheels that you purchase. And what you're going to want to do now is get those splash guards from underneath the car. And looking at it from, I guess, this perspective, you're going to want to measure from 5.5 inches from this edge here to here. So basically, or it's 5.5 inches from this edge. So you're gonna grab your tape measure and you're gonna mark 5.5 inches. That's the amount that you want to remove. That's the amount that you want to remove with your die grinder. So you grab your Sharpie and you mark 5.5 inches from that edge and you remove this whole area. This is basically where part of your diffuser strake is going to run across or along. And then for the other part of the cutting process, what you're going to want to do is mask off that little outer area of the diffuser. I already have this side masked, and you're going to want to grab an outer diffuser strake. So the diffuser strake, the mounting holes, you're going to want to align it there. You're going to want to align them precisely if you're going to have, and remember, you have to remember if you're shifting it forward or shifting it backwards within the hole, because they're somewhat elliptic shaped, or they're long type of holes, whatever. So once you're happy with where they're mounted, or with respect to those ones, then you're going to want to mark with a Sharpie right along that edge, using the diffuser strake as your guide point to where you want to cut. And what this will ultimately do is allow the strake to come into contact for its mounting holes between this area here and the surface of the diffuser. A little word of advice is to properly hold it, you can go ahead and secure a bolt through there, or you can just manually hold it, and then you use the Sharpie to mark the line where you're going to cut with the die grinder. So you're going to want to mark, and then you want to carefully cut straight as possible that line so that you can properly put the diffuser strake. Alright, so I finally finished cutting. Got kind of dark because I started late, but I did go ahead and remove that 5.5 inches from the back. When you're using the die grinder to do this, make sure you're careful, because with the heat generated, it makes the plastic melt, and the longer you hold the grinder there, the more the plastic's going to melt, and eventually it just starts to clog up and hot pieces of plastic start flying at you. That didn't happen to me, but with other projects it has, so just be careful. Always use your glasses. Here's the rest of the pieces that I grinded off the diffuser. You can see how those turned out. Of course, my second cuts were always better than the first ones because I didn't know how to properly do it the first time, or a little bit shabby the first time. So you kind of know what to expect the second time, but as a reminder, just be careful when you're doing it and take your time. Alright, so now we're gonna get to the fastening part. So what you're gonna need to do is grab the two inner diffusers, and then you're going to want to grab 10 of the 16mm Allen screws, 10 washers, and then 10 of the serrated nuts. So I was kind of confused at first, but the 16mm screws are the smallest ones that come in the package, and then you're going to want to use these washers. You're going to want 10 of them. Then you're going to want the serrated nuts. So the serrated edges are going to go on the bottom side, and the washers are going to go on the top side. So it's going to go against the strakes, and then through the strakes, And then there's no washer on the underside of the diffuser, or underside as in like the area you can't see underneath the car. So this side will be going underneath the car, and then the serrated nut will be going on top. The reason why it's serrated is because it's going to want to gradually like grab the material behind it, which would be the carbon fiber of the diffuser. So the specs do state to torque them down to 8 foot-pounds or snug them up. And I'm not sure if I'll properly achieve the right preload, but what I'll be using is just like a drop of thread locker just for an added insurance. If these nuts had like a nylock, or if they were nylocks, I wouldn't be using them, but since it's near the exhaust of the car and it's prone to vibrations and heat, then I want to be sure that these nuts will hold. So I'm adding the extra security with the thread locker. So once you finally put the fastening screws through the strakes, once you finally put the fastener screws through the strakes, this is what it should look like. Now I haven't completely fastened these yet. I just kind of put the bolts through for demonstration, but the top of the head should be here. And remember, the strakes are supposed to be sweeping outwards towards the outside of the car. Alright, so I just finished fastening the diffuser strakes to the diffuser of the car. You also want to be very, very conscious of how much you're torquing these. 8 pounds might not sound like a lot, but if, for example, you didn't have the surface clean enough and you had something sandwiched between there, you're going to feel 8 foot-pounds before they're even snug against each other. Carbon fiber is not great in compression since it's a matrix, and if you feel any like excessive squishing, don't keep going. The next sign to squishing would be, I guess, cracking, and you don't want to crack the carbon. So that's just something to be aware of. So this is just the opposite side, and you can see everything bolted up pretty good. One thing that I did actually do was these slots that are there, I know they're like kind of oblong shaped, but I fasten the slots in a way that when I fasten the strakes, I pull them towards the rear of the car, which is the same direction as the airflow going underneath. So reinstall the splash guards first, and then you can go ahead and reinstall the diffuser. Alright, so I went ahead and reinstalled it underneath the car. It's kind of dark outside, but doing my best to show you all the points where I reinstalled, and this is the area where the rear diffuser is going to sweep out. I don't know if you can see that properly, but I'm going to move on to another step that is critical to the installation. Here's a critical part to the installation. You want to go ahead and take one of your swag stickers, then you want to grab the 2 outer strakes, and you want to picture it oriented on the car properly. And what you're going to want to do, you're going to want to peel off the masking tape and paste your Verus engineering sticker right there. I put the decals on the lowermost part, where it's most visible to all them boys who want to be like, oh, that's cool, where'd you get that? And then it's just a way to kind of show off the brand itself. Alright, so I finally finished the installation of the under diffuser. It took me probably about 4 hours, but that's only because I was recording and doing stuff in between, but I'm pretty satisfied with how it turned out. This is the underside of the car. There's that 12. There are those slots. Reference to the car, these strakes are pulled backwards towards the rear of the car. So this is just how it seats against that area that you cut with the die grinder of the diffuser, and then that side there is where you cut for the splash guard, because the diffuser kind of sweeps across those two sides. That's pretty much it. It's pretty clean. It's very light, and I'll be doing some photos too, so stay tuned.